Hi there, I'm Katie Phillips. I'm the founder of the School of Self-Love, and I'm a transformational and intuitive coach. And it's my absolute pleasure to join you today in celebration of World Menopause Day. I think it's important that we have more conversations about menopause, get that white elephant out of the corner of the room and expose the truth of what menopause is, and actually start having more positive, optimistic conversations about something that seems largely to have been deemed as something to be ashamed or embarrassed about, something to be swept under the carpet and just simply not discussed. It's not helpful. And on my own journey and having spoken to a lot of women around this subject, I'm starting to discover that awareness is crucial. Education and awareness around this changes everything. It changes your experience of it and makes the experience of menopause far more positive. So today I'm joined by two other women to have a conversation around perimenopause and menopause. We're going to explain to you exactly what they both are. We women should know because we're all going to go through it. And we're going to have a talk about our own experiences of menopause, why it's an important conversation to have now, and anything that comes up. So let me first introduce you to Tanith Lee. Tanith is otherwise known as Mrs Menopause. She is a women's integrative health and wellness coach, and you can find her over at mrsmenopause.co.uk. And I'm also joined by Sandra Peat, who runs a communications agency called wearesuperhuman.co.uk. And essentially, they've just done a really important and exciting piece of research into menopause, where they've explored how society are responding to menopause these days and what we women do and don't know about it. And I think it's had some fairly surprising results. So I'm really keen to talk to you both. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. Such an important conversation. So let's start with Mrs. Menopause, Tanith. I think you're going to be best placed to answer my first question. What is perimenopause and what is menopause? What's the difference between the two? Do you mind answering that? Thank you.
We tend to use the term menopause, but actually you could split that down into different phases, I guess. Perimenopause is the bit that we all hear about most often because that's the lead up until your last period, and that's when all the fun symptoms can occur. Don't necessarily happen to every woman, and I think that's really important to put across, but it happens to a large majority of women. So perimenopause can
because they do say, don't they, that 25% of women don't actually experience perimenopause symptoms at all.
That's right, and of course we don't hear about them. So it's good to talk about that because I think most women expect and assume to get all these symptoms they read about. So it's not everyone does, which is great. So how long does that period of time before your last period last? It depends on the woman. We all are so different. So it can be a couple of years or it could be up to 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And then menopause is literally your last period.
Right, so you've achieved menopause when you haven't had a period for how long?
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah, 1 year. And then after that, so technically your last period finishes, you probably don't know, but then you're postmenopause. But until you have that year clear of any menstruation, then you don't know. So you kind of have to take a little look backwards, but that's kind of really how it works. Yeah.
Right. So perimenopause is the period of time leading up to you achieving menopause. And you've achieved menopause when you've not had a period for an entire 12 months. Then you go into postmenopause.
Yeah.
And perimenopause can last any period of time and can start at any time. Like, what's the average age a woman can expect to start perimenopause?
Probably mid-40s, mid to late 40s. The average age of a woman's last period in this country, in the UK, is 52.
Right.
But of course, that's not set in stone. I know women that are still having periods from 56 and 58, and some that have had, their periods have stopped earlier. So there's no textbook on this.
But I know your experience is different. You started perimenopause quite young, didn't you?
Yeah, I was in my 30s. So I can't really exactly pinpoint when I went through the menopause, but it was around about the age of 37, 38 when I kind of stopped. I had a final bleed, but I think actually it happened before that. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you are now officially post-menopausal.
I am, yeah. I'm 46 now, so I'm post-menopause. So
right.
Interesting place to be.
And I wanted to ask you about this because for me, I'm 44 now, and only a few months ago, when I happened to be 43, I realized I was in perimenopause, and it absolutely took me by surprise because I thought that I thought menopause was just, I didn't even know, which is why this conversation is so important. I didn't have a clue when I was supposed to start menopause, but I thought it was something in my 50s, maybe my mid 50s, it would start to be on my radar. Right. And it took me by surprise at 43 to discover I was in perimenopause. Yeah. With all sorts of different weird and wonderful symptoms, which I hadn't linked together as perimenopause. I thought, oh, I've suddenly got adult acne. Oh, I'm suddenly sweating at night in my sleep. That's a bit weird. Oh, I'm feeling quite down and depressed and anxious. That's odd. And I all these different things all actually were perimenopause.
Yeah, absolutely. But really, if you think about our hormones start to change in our mid-30s. If you look at the fertility rates and how they take quite a nosedive after the age of about 35, our hormones are already starting to change. But it's just we don't put a label on it. So they're already starting to change, and I think this is why we need to have these conversations with women to say, look, changes are happening. You may not have any typical symptoms, but now's the time to have a little look what's going on.
And well, actually, perhaps you, Tanith, can share some of the symptoms or were you even aware of symptoms, or were you so off the radar that in your 30s?
Yeah, I was aware of symptoms. So it's weird. For me, in my 30s, I was having horrendous night sweats from my early 30s. And at the time, I don't know why I never questioned it. I look back and I'm like, where was I? I was so probably disconnected from myself at that time that I didn't really question it. It was just a bit of a joke. But for me, it was the mental health side of things. And that's what I'm really passionate about around menopause. That's the side of it that isn't really talked about as much. And that's how it really affected me more than anything was I was just, I was depressed. I was anxious. I didn't want to see anyone. I had no confidence. I felt lost, exhausted. It was just, those are the kind of symptoms I had. I didn't necessarily have the hot flushes that lots of women do. So I'm very grateful that I didn't have that. But for me, it was more up here than anything else.
I hear you, and that was my experience too earlier this year, and until I learned a way of managing it with supplements, actually. Diet, supplements, and exercise. Yeah. Total game changer. And awareness and education, total game changer, because you don't feel like you're going nuts. This is something that happens to all women. Sandra, what's your experience? Where are you at on your menopausal journey?
Well, I'm 44, and I think I'm perimenopausal. I mean, my periods are really all over the place now, so I don't really know. And I do wake up every once in a while in a sweat. And definitely the anxiety and the moods, very much part of the everyday existence that sort of seem to come out of nowhere. So I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, actually.
Yeah, I know there's a stat, I don't have it in front of me, but the women in the UK, and Tanith, you might know it, the highest rate of women's suicide in the UK coincides with their perimenopause years. Around sort of 49 to 52, I think. Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting because, depression and anxiety is a major can be a major part of this, and it can be managed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that was me. I mean, that was literally where it took me to suicidal thoughts. I share that because I just think loads of women feel similar. And I think they go mad or losing their mind, or they don't understand what's happening to them. And that's where it took me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And thankfully there's a lot of help available now. Why should we be talking about, we've kind of touched on it, but why should we be talking about perimenopause and menopause now? Like, why now? Tanith? Oh no, Sandra, go ahead, actually, yeah.
I think it's really interesting, actually, if you think about the whole story around depression and symptoms, from the work that we've done and the research that we've done. A lot of it, you know, obviously there's a lot going on for women, and, you know, there is a problem with access to information and women feeling like they know where to go. I think that's, you know, certainly in our research, we found that, you know, 71% of women put up and grin and bear it rather than actually find out what they need to find out. But it's not helped by the fact that we treat women who are at this point in their life like they're past it. With another great stat, actually, which is quite useful for this, is looking at society's assumptions around menopause, and 81% of women feel that society's assumptions around menopause and women are inaccurate. So there's a whole disconnect between this woman and how she's feeling and how society's portraying her. And I definitely feel like that feeds that cycle of depression and anxiety as a woman coming into this phase.
Definitely. What else came out of your research, actually? Because that research was profound, wasn't it? What else came out that would be really interesting to share?
Yeah, there's quite a few interesting points. I mean, you know, I think there's the whole statistics around, you know, women feeling like they're that society's seeing that they're past it when they hit the menopause, you know, and, you know, 71% of women said they don't feel as sexy or and attractive as they once did. So there's a whole, you know, it's all wrapped up in our society's obsession with youth. But, you know, menopause is like falling off a cliff, and culture and society really up until very recently, and only just, has reinforced that quite a lot. But what's really interesting about it is it's a time when actually many women feel like they're in the prime of their life, and they don't feel like they want to be defined by age. So there's a disconnect there. There's a tension that really needs to come out. But, you know, the research was really fascinating because there are so many facets that this period of your life and these changes in your life affect, whether it be sex, work, anxiety, you know, or there's all different areas. And, you know, I think the main thing is that many women just don't feel like they feel comfortable talking about it, and they suffer in silence, which is such a shame, isn't it, at a time when you're feeling otherwise so dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that was my experience too, because there I was at 43 feeling like I'd kind of reached the prime of my life. I mean, I got married last month for the first time, you know, it took me that long, but I'm like in the prime of my life, enjoying my life. And then menopause? Pardon? You know, it really, and as soon as I was told that's what was going on for me, my instant reaction was this societal kind of conditioning and programming really it was very unconscious. It kicked in and said, well, that's it. That's the end of the road. It's downhill from here. You're getting old. You're going to lose your sex drive. You're going to be unattractive to yourself and your husband. You know, it's like, it felt like the end, which is awful. And it's absolutely not the truth. And so can we please talk now about how this change of life is it's actually a positive opportunity for women? How is it a positive opportunity? How can we turn it on its head and look at it for what it really is? Tanith, do you want to go first?
Okay, so one of the ways I look at menopause, I think we need to rebrand it. But
yeah, we do.
Is when we're in that all those deep symptoms, and, you know, especially we're thinking, we're wondering what's going on. It's to me kind of almost like Mother's Nature way of making us look at ourselves, making us take notice, making us actually take a little bit of a regroup, see where we're at, you know, in life, who we are in our different roles, and then perhaps that gives us a chance to decide who we want to be moving forward, because we can make a decision, can't we? But we can choose to just kind of, you know, think, well, that's it then, it's all over, and I might as well just go and sit on the sofa and not move, kind of thing. Or I can decide I can take action and start to see what I can do to help myself, and then, you know, look up a little bit and see what there is to see. There's so much to see in the future. The thing is, you know, and I also think, you know, when we go through the menopause, if we're living longer and longer and longer, if we go through menopause at 52, if we're living to our 90s, are we literally just writing off nearly half of our life? And I just think that's that's crazy. But I think there's so much we can do, and there is so much to gain from the menopause, but it's very hard to see that and feel that when you're feeling like rubbish.
Absolutely. Sandra, what are your thoughts about menopause being a positive experience?
Yeah, I think that point Tanith's made about the fact that so many of the associations that are associated with the menopause come from a time where you were probably coming up to being a grandmother and maybe had a decade left on your life. Now, in the Western world, as fortunate as we are, that's not the way things are for us. As Tanith said, you're likely to live for another 40 years. And the other side of that is also, you may well be coming into new relationships. The divorce rate in their 40s and 50s is relatively high. The biggest, I think it's one of the biggest groups of that are having issues around sexually transmitted diseases are women in their 50s. Women are sexually active. Wow. There is a whole new world that is opening up for women that has been a product of all sorts of things, like our work situation and the way we, the world becoming more equal, thank goodness. It means that the options are endless, and I think that whole association with using it as a time to reflect and kind of decide what your next version of yourself is going to be is a really, really powerful way to look at it, because it is a time of transformation, and and it is and transformation hurts. It can be quite painful and difficult, but if you can look at it in a way and go, okay, well, what do I actually want to be and where do I want to go next, it can be a fantastic time. Saying all of that, if you cannot get past the physical symptoms, which are incredibly difficult from all the reports that I've seen, a lot of this stuff feels like a long time away. So I think those two things need to be balanced. It's kind of the vision of what you want in the future, but actually making your day-to-day more stable and more livable and more bearable, taking it. So they're the two sides of it from my point of view.
No, it's a good point. And there are all sorts of ways now that we can manage the perimenopause symptoms, aren't there? I mean, Tanith, do you want to speak to some of those? I can share some of my own experience, but do you want to go ahead? I mean, like, where do we begin? There's so much we can do now. We're in so much choice now, aren't we? How we manage it positively.
Luckily, I mean, when I started doing this about 8 years ago, there wasn't really that many people talking about it. There wasn't many Mrs Menopauses around or anything, but now there's more and more women wanting to help women, which is fantastic. And I would say seek out someone to help you. There is stuff you can do by yourself, but I think to save time and save energy, go and see an expert, whether that's going to be a doctor, whether it's going to be some kind of nutritional therapist, functional medicine doctor, whoever that person is. Go and see someone and get some tailored advice that fits you as an individual, because that's the thing that's going to get you the quickest results, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, on that note, I think I ought to mention that I did interview 18 experts around menopause from around the globe. Like you said, ranging from Harley Street HRT specialists, GPs, to nutritionists, to like people coming from a spiritual perspective, to like, who didn't I interview? It was such a range, wasn't it? And it's an amazingly valuable resource, which you can get at theschoolofself.love/my-menopause. So ladies, Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the thing that I wanted to add to that point, which I think is super powerful, is the power of community. So, there is the whole piece around getting advice, which you definitely need to do. But I think that what I've seen through the work that we've done is that, women supporting women, in the physical sense, but maybe even through social media, is an incredibly powerful tool. And I know, that a lot of women find a lot of solace in that kind of level of community. And I think that the menopause communities I've seen on Facebook and various places are probably some of the most engaged that there are. These women desperately want to help each other, and I think they're a lifeline for as you go through this physical experience.
I completely agree with that. And actually, I wouldn't have even known I was in perimenopause unless, if it wasn't for being sat at that dinner table that night and two girlfriends, Sandra, you being one of them, saying, hey, maybe all of that is perimenopause, and I wouldn't have known that. And thankfully, I have realized that it is an opportunity now, you know, to kind of continue on that conversation around it being a positive experience. There's such an opportunity within this. And I really do genuinely feel that it is actually our body calling out to us and saying, okay, darling, you have given to everybody else for all of these years. You've given to your career, you've given to your husband, partners, you've boyfriends, girlfriends, you've given to your kids. Now it's time to give to you. And I really feel it's our body saying that. And for us, because we are living so much longer, it is a perfect opportunity to take stock and look at our lifestyle, look at how we're taking care of ourselves, and set ourselves up healthily for the next 30, 40, 50 years, because we do have that much time left. We've got to manage our bone health. We've got to manage our heart health. You know, this is the opportunity to actually do that. So it is a chance to finally put ourselves first. And what I've come to realize through all the research I've done and all the experts I've spoken to is you just do not need to suffer through it anymore. Those days have gone and passed. It doesn't need to be like that anymore. And we can absolutely be in choice around how we manage our menopause as the most beautifully natural part of life, just as getting our period was, and just as having babies was. And you know, it's a part of life. And I'm excited to be having conversations with women like you to start spreading the word that it can be a very positive experience. So thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Good.
You're welcome. Lots of love. Bye.
Thank you.